we want to first just welcome all those who are, oh, I don't have a mic. We just, we want to welcome all those that are viewing on our broadcast and on our Facebook page. And tonight's forum is supposed to enlighten the citizens of Gary as we talk about this, this referendum in regards to our school system. And I think it's important to have continued dialogue and discussion and information so that on November 3rd, folks can vote intelligently because you have all the information given to you as possible. So tonight is just to give information, and then so the format is I'm going to open up with a prayer, and then we'll go into some greetings by Chelsea Whittington, who's one of the co-moderators, and then she will, and then after she finishes, we have our mayor, Jerome Prince, that's on our virtual Zoom piece platform, and then he will just give some greetings, and then we'll have the introductions of all of our guest speakers tonight, and then Chelsea would maneuver that. And then we'll go into like a part one, part two. Part one will be discussing the impact of the referendum, and each guest speaker tonight has a specific role in which they will bring their perspective in regards to the referendum. And then the second piece of our conversation tonight will deal with community concerns regarding the referendum, and you all who are viewing on our Facebook pages, you can ask questions there, and those questions will be filtered to us, and then those who are here can appropriately respond to those questions, okay? And so that's how we're going to proceed tonight. And so let's just let's pause just a moment as we pray. Almighty God, we thank you for being our creator and our God. And Lord, we thank you for this time that we come together to share information, and as we, each of us, share our passion for the youth and the children and their education. And God, we continue to pray for our city, the city of Gary, and all of the leadership prior and present. God, we ask that you would just continue to bless us as we come together to share our thoughts and to share facts and to share information that would encourage the citizens of Gary to be able to make a decision on voting for this referendum. So God, we thank you and we glorify you in all things. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so we're going to turn it over to Chelsea, who's going to give her greetings and welcome you. And then we'll turn it over to Mayor Jerome Prince to give his greetings, and we'll move from there.
Thank you so much, Pastor, for having us and for just having the foresight to offer to host tonight's discussion. It has been several weeks, months going on that we have been going throughout the community to share information before we know that information is indeed power. As those of you who are viewing, we invite you after this forum, if you're looking for more information, to please visit garyschools.org, and you can click on the referendum tab. There are questions and answers because, as Pastor Jackson indicated, we want voters to make an educated vote. So at this time, we're going to move swiftly into the program and have the Honorable Jerome Prince deliver greetings. Mayor Prince.
Thank you, Chelsea, and I want to say good evening to everyone, and certainly thank everyone who's joining us today. I especially want to thank Pastor Ramin Jackson, my pastor, for hosting this discussion. I'm always pleased when we see community leaders and community members come together to discuss the different challenges and try to work through the unique challenges that our city faces every day. As we all know, the Gary Community School Corporation is facing significant challenges in providing the children with a quality education and also simultaneously trying to fund our traditional public school system. Tonight, I don't have any intentions, and I won't go into the details about the referendum, but I will note that recently the Gary County passed a resolution supporting the referendum, and I'm certain that those members who both supported and opposed it did so and voted their collective consciences, and to that extent, I certainly want to thank them. As I've said since the inception or the idea of the referendum occurred, and I've said repeatedly that I'm not going to take a public position on this referendum. I think this is strictly a decision that the voters must make. I, like many of you, am a homeowner and certainly have an opinion on it, but it's my opinion that it's not appropriate for me as the mayor to take a public position. And as I have repeated many times, it's my opinion that this is a decision, rather, that the voters will absolutely make. With that, I want to thank you all again for the opportunity. Certainly thank you for engaging in this discussion, and I look forward to the outcomes or results of this dialogue. Thank you, Pastor.
Okay. Well, we thank you for giving your greetings on tonight. We're going to have Chelsea to introduce all of our guests that are here with us, and then we'll go call them one by one to be able to give their opinion and response and information in accordance to their background and expertise in regards to this referendum.
I think my role in doing the introductions is totally appropriate, as I have been spending countless hours with the individuals who are in this room tonight. And I will start with my far left. She is the manager of the Gary Community School Corporation, Dr. Paige McNulty. And to her right is the Honorable Dr. Vernon G. Smith, State Representative. To the right of you, Pastor, is the Honorable former Mayor of Gary, Karen Freeman Wilson, and President and CEO of the Chicago Urban League. To her right is our Council President and First District Representative, Councilman William Godwin. And to his right, she hosts so many hats and titles. Our Gary Teachers Union President, our State AFT President, our National Executive Vice President. You can clarify those. Gleneva Dunham is with us tonight. And so the way we have organized tonight's agenda is that, as you stated, and on Zoom we have Coach Earl Smith, retired educator, dean, coach, legend, you name it. He will also be contributing to this conversation. My colleague and friend, Dr. Vanessa Allen McLeod, who is the president and CEO of the Urban League of Northwest Indiana. And it is our hope that Senator Eddie Melton will also join us shortly. As Pastor Jackson indicated earlier, each of the panelists whom I just introduced has an angle to discuss when it comes to the referendum. And we are going to start with our manager, because for so many weeks and months, she has been all over the community and telling anybody who will listen why this referendum is important to the future of our children. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you once again our manager of the Gary Community School Corporation, Dr. Paige McNulty.
Thank you, Chelsea, and thank you again for hosting this evening. We really appreciate it. As Chelsea mentioned, we have been working hard to make sure that we are visiting as many venues that we can to educate people about the importance of the referendum that's on the ballot November 3rd. We did not make this decision lightly to put the referendum on the ballot. We understand that these are difficult times, especially right now during COVID. However, this is critical for the growth and continued progress of our school district. And I would take a little bit of, I would dispute a little bit, I guess, of what the mayor said, in that our school district is struggling. I disagree with that. I think our school district is absolutely on the rise and moving forward in a positive direction. And so what I would say is that we want to continue those efforts that we are already making, such as the giving out of 4,500 Chromebooks in the hotspots and providing meals to our community and professional development for our teachers weekly. And I think those things are very positive things that we want to continue to grow on. But this referendum is critical for us to be able to continue moving in a good direction so that we are competitive with our neighboring districts. The referendum that's on the ballot, we are asking for people to consider, it's approximately 20 cents a day for an average home assessed value of $60,000 home, which would net gain us about $8 million a year over 8 years. And with those funds, that would enable us to increase fine arts programs for our students, after-school activities, so that students can participate in things such as Science Olympiad, Spell Bowl, more athletics programming for our students, raises for our teachers. Many of you might have heard me say this many times before, but it's worth saying over and over again. Our teachers have not had a raise in about 12 years, and it's very difficult for our school district to recruit teachers to come to our district and stay if we can't give them raises and if we can't be competitive with our neighboring districts. So I want to applaud our teachers who have been with us for many years, who have been working tirelessly with our students and doing a fantastic job. Because they are dedicated to our students. And I believe that their relationships that they have with the students and with the parents is what is making us successful right now, and we're going to continue to grow on that. But we need to, again, be able to recruit teachers and have to have a competitive salary to be able to do that. So for those reasons, and many more that I'll go into here shortly, I think that our school district is on a good trajectory, and we need to continue to move in that fashion.
Thank you so much, Dr. McNulty. Dr. Vernon G. Smith has been our anchor in letting us know from a legislative standpoint where we've been, where we are, and why this referendum is a critical piece to the puzzle. Dr. Smith.
Thank you. I would like to thank Pastor Jackson for allowing me to be here and be a part of this panel, and to thank the committee for the support that they've given to this cause. Yesterday I had a conversation with a friend, and he's opposed to the referendum, and he feels like the state should bail us out, that it is the state's responsibility for the education of the children of the state. I agree with them wholeheartedly. It is the state's responsibility. We know that the 10th Amendment in the Constitution has been the ruling that gave the states responsible for the education of children of this state. However, the state is the main culprit that got us into this situation, so we can't expect them to be our Superman to fly in and save us. Now, Pastor, I believe in salvation, and I got a Savior. He's Jesus Christ, the same one that you serve. But the bottom line is we cannot expect the state to be our Savior, because the state has shown us historically that it is not sensitive to our needs. There's also a misnomer that it was all a lot of mismanagement that created this situation. If at one point our debt was $120 million, I am sure, with this being a chocolate city and with the leaders being chocolate, that they would have come in and locked us all up if we had mismanaged $120 million. So we must get rid of that misnomer. Gary is in this situation, some because of some of the economics of our community. We had an exodus of citizens. And so our ADM, which is the way that the state allocates dollars for education, is based on the count of students. Our ADM has been diminishing over the years. Even before MGT got here, we had an exodus of families, which meant that we had an exodus of students. And so that was the beginning of our problem. And then secondly, the legislature, in response to the Miller section of Gary, and other areas that were concerned about the cost of a local property tax, passed legislation to create a tax cap. And for the citizens, it's been 1% of the assessed valuation. Well, based on this, these tax cap, the need did not go away we wanted to keep the revenue, the funding source for it, but the need has prevailed. And so that became a problem for us. And that is even greater this year when Lake County was put into the same situation as the other counties are. And then the state changed our school formula. That came from places like Fishers and Munster and stuff, those richer districts who felt that the urban communities were getting too many dollars. And so the legislature changed the school formula. In changing the school formula, it favored the growing school corporation, which means suburbia is the benefit of the new school formula, and the urban schools and the rural schools have become the stepchildren for funding for education. With the school formula, there used to be weights in there. Those were things that you got additional dollars for. You had special needs, a lot of poverty, as we have in Gary. If you have a lot of special education students, all those kinds of things disappeared. They also took out the ghoster factor, which allowed us to adjust whenever we lost a student, because you don't lose 30 students out of one grade and one class at a time. You lose a student out of this grade, another student out of this grade and this class, and another student out of that grade and that class. And so they had the ghoster principle a part of the school formula, which allowed you to adjust. Well, they did away with that. And then we come up with these alternative forms of education. It's called choice. And so we put so much money into charter schools, they're supposed to cost us less. They've been steady increasing the amount of money that goes to charter schools. They came up with virtual education. They said they could do it for half of the cost of the traditional public schools. Now they're getting 90%, and they don't have all the expenses that we have when we operate our traditional public schools. They don't have a building that they have to insure. They don't have a building that they have to keep clean and operate and heat. They don't have all of the overhead. They don't have to pay the insurances and the utility bills and all those kinds of things that traditional public schools are required to do. And so virtual education, which has been dismal, really a non-productive form of education for our children. And then, of course, we came up with vouchers, where students have a choice to go to those private schools. And we know that those private schools are not being held accountable like our traditional public schools are, because they have smaller numbers, and they have said if they have smaller numbers of students, then they don't have to be accountable for taking the tests that of the traditional public schools are required. So the public needs to know that Gary did not get hit by itself. It was helped significantly by the legislation that has come through the Indiana legislature. And so, let's keep that in mind and stop being so hard on our own and start putting some pressure on Indianapolis to do what is right for our children.
And to add on that the money does not follow the students. I want to make sure that we say that. So if a student comes to us next week, for example, from a charter school, we don't get any funding for that student anymore, but yet we still service that student, whether it's a regular ed student or a student with special needs. And we do that with open arms. But you need to understand that money does not follow the student. And so that is what is unique for us as a public school. But I do want to say that, and I made this announcement earlier today, that I think it's important for us to celebrate that our ADM, meaning our tuition, our number of students that are enrolled in our public school, went up for the first time in 12 years. And I think that's a huge celebration. And I think, again, that shows the progress that's being made in our Gary Community Schools. For the first time, our enrollment has gone up. So that's a huge, huge win.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Thank you, Dr. McNulty. We are going to move to our next panelist, who is on the roster for tonight. Mayor Karen Freeman Wilson, President and CEO of the Chicago Urban League, you have a special lens to this because you were at the helm of the city during a time when the takeover of the Gary schools was imminent or happening, and we know that you fought against that, but also got on board once it happened to work collaboratively with the district to ensure that it continued to press forward, and now the referendum returns for a third time. And we'd like for you to weigh in from a perspective of a former city official and a resident tax-paying citizen.
Good evening. First to Pastor Jackson and to my fellow panelists, to our mayor, and to all who are listening or participating. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about something that is of great interest to me for a number of reasons. One is I do understand the special nexus between having a good traditional public educational system and having the ability to grow a city. When businesses come to a city, they don't ask about charter schools, they don't ask about private schools, they ask about your traditional public school system. And so, Chelsea, you're right. When there was a decision pending about whether or not there should be a takeover of the Gary Community School Corporation, I fought against it tooth and nail. I fought with Dr. Smith against it because he was against it as well, with other legislators, with members of the school board. But once that decision was made, I was very clear on the fact that it was necessary for us to all work together to support the Gary Community School Corporation. And so when I hear that there has been an increase in the ADM, that means that there is progress being made. When I hear about the buildings that are currently being utilized by our students being fixed and being repaired, that roofs are being repaired and other things are being done, I know that there is progress being made. But at the same time, I understand that there is much more work to do. And I've heard people who are in opposition to the referendum talk about a lot of things. They talk about not wanting to have their property taxes raised. They talk about what happened in the past. They talk about what the legislature should do. But very rarely, in fact, I can't even remember a time that somebody has said something about the kids. I don't hear them talk about the kids walking around buckets as they go through the schools. I don't hear them talk about our teachers who wash uniforms of children who they don't take home, but who they think enough of to educate that they are willing to make sure that those children aren't embarrassed by dirty uniforms. I don't hear them talk about the fact that a lot of our teachers buy school supplies, buy breakfast, buy snacks out of their own pockets in order to enhance their education. And I don't hear them talk about the teachers who go the extra mile on behalf of children. Somebody said, I don't believe in raising taxes to give raises. You're not raising taxes to give raises. You're raising taxes to support our children. And if you're not supporting this referendum because you are against MGT, then you are cutting your nose off to spite your face, because the only way that we will regain control of the Gary Community School Corporation is if we are able to remove the year-to-year deficit. I'm not talking about the debt. People often get the debt confused with the deficit. I'm talking about the year-to-year profit and loss statement. And right now, the only way that we can regain control is if you have 2 years where you're showing the absence of a deficit. The referendum is the only way that that will happen. And to focus on MGT, to focus on what the state should do, to focus on all these other things means that you don't care about our kids. I was infuriated when I saw the signs go up saying vote no. Not because it was a difference in opinion, but because the only thing they could talk about was money. I didn't see anybody say anything about the kids. This is about the kids, and that's why I'm saying and am spending the capital, because people know I am happy in Chicago. I'm excited about what I'm doing with the Chicago Urban League, but this is still my city. I still live here, and we need to vote yes for the referendum.
Thank you, President Karen Freeman Wilson. I see nods to your right, so we're going to move right on over to the right to our council president. And we read with great vigor and interest your recent op-ed that ran in the Times and other publications around your support and your angle from being a city official and making the case of how the two come together, public education and city government. Councilman Goblin.
Well, absolutely. Thank you, Chelsea, and thanks to all the panelists and, of course, Pastor Jackson for hosting us here at St. Timothy. I want to first say it's so great to see how well the churches and the community organizations have gotten involved with this issue, not necessarily taking a political position as a church, but educating us about the facts. There's a lot of misinformation that goes around when we talk about this, and of course I know that I've taken a lot of heat as a councilperson for the 1st District, where there is a very strong opposition. And I think on the former Mayor Freeman Wilson's point, is that we easily get focused on the dollars and not the children who are currently in the classrooms, in the schools, who are counting on us, counting on their teachers, counting on the leaders within the school to provide a first-rate education that will prepare them for today and for tomorrow. Secondly, in my other life as a real estate broker, I know that we are not attracting families. We're not attracting families to this city. And the only way we're going to sustain our city and stop the growth and begin to actually stop the loss of population and begin growth is by having families to move here. We know public safety is important, but right alongside it is education. And you must have a strong public school system. What this referendum does, now that we're at the 3rd opportunity to do this, is that it sends a message, not just to Indianapolis, but to the region about what our commitment is to public education. I recognize it's a pandemic, and folks are concerned about cost. We all are, and I share that. But we also know that this state has basically said the referendum is the way in which you will get more dollars into your public school system. I believe 18 school districts this year considered referenda, and out of those 18, 16 out of those 18 passed those referenda, and I think those votes were in May and June, when the pandemic was truly out of control, and we know there are still challenges there. I do want to say that the Gary Common Council, as the mayor has stated, did pass a resolution voicing its support for the referendum. I want to be careful to say the particular individuals who voted for that referendum, I think it voted in support of the referendum, would be Councilman at Large Ronald Brewer, as well as 1st District Councilman William Godwin, 3rd District Councilperson Mary Brown, 4th District Councilperson Ty Atkins, 5th District Councilperson Linda Barnes Caldwell, who actually sponsored the resolution, and 6th District Councilperson, in terms of overturning something, Dwight Williams. So 5 of the 6 district councilpersons who you have elected to represent you have looked at this issue, have heard from the community, have heard what's at stake, and have said this is something that we want to endorse. And I think it's very important for you to know that. Ultimately, it is your choice. The voters must decide, and we will deal with whatever the outcomes are. But I think it's so important to remember that we are sending a message about what our values are, what our morals are, what our ethics are when it comes to the value we place on the children, on the schools, and on families. coming to, staying in, and being successful in this community.
Thank you, Councilman. Gleneva Dunham, longtime teacher, Gary resident, taxpayers, talk to us about the referendum and how it directly impacts the hundreds and hundreds of teachers that you lead by the union as well as across the state and even nationally.
Thank you, Chelsea. And thank you, Reverend Jackson, for opening up your house to us this afternoon, this evening. And so, as I sit here, my heart is beating so fast because I look across the panel, and we've been doing this for quite some time. And, you know, we have organized this, we have thought about this, we have, you know, laid it out on the line for our children. And that's what it's about, as the mayor said, it's about our children. And she's absolutely right. You know, I listen to the daily radio shows, and, you know, they have almost become comical if it wasn't so pitiful and detrimental to what they're doing to our city as a whole, just to hear the negativity spewed. And I see the signs as well. Matter of fact, my signs at the union office were taken from my yard that said, from the union building that said, vote yes for the referendum. You know, I came to work on Monday, they were all gone, and I'm like, you know, who's doing this? And so the community has become really divided on this issue, but it's all about the kids. And if you think about the kids, I don't see how you could really be divided on this. So I sit in this chair as a 43-year teacher in the Gary Community School Corporation. 32 of those years are spent in kindergarten. So I've seen children grow, blossom. I'm just thinking about I'm going to Westside football games this season because my great nephew is playing freshman backup quarterback. So shouts out to my great nephew.
Hey.
But I also have one of my ex-kindergarten students who's a cheerleader. And so, you know, I sit in those stands and I watch her Friday after Friday doing her cheers and turning her flips. And when she gets up off that track, she has gravel in her hand. And so after one game, I went to her and I said, you know, I know that hurts. You know, she said, but Ms. Dunham, I'm a cheerleader. I turn flips. That's what I do. But our children should not have to turn flips on a track that's so out of repair that they get gravel in their hands. And so that's what I see as a teacher. I see the football field. My great nephew that I just mentioned, he put together a clip on his own, and he put it on YouTube of his games. And so as I looked at the different clips and I'm looking at the different fields at the different schools, and I'm looking at the quality of the Westside football field compared to the other schools that he's playing against, and I'm just looking at the color of the grass and that kind of thing, and I'm like, that is not fair to our kids. They should not have to live like that. They should not have to go to school like that. I attend Trinity. Pastor Dwight Gardner is my pastor. And so last Sunday, he made the comment that he had went to a Pop Warner football game at Crown Point. And they don't call their football field a football field. They call it a complex. He said on one field, the Pee-wees were playing. On another field, our church member was playing. On another field, a baseball game was taking place. And he said that is, you know, our children deserve the same thing. It doesn't matter the color of your skin. Children are children. They deserve the same thing. So as a 43-year teacher, I often say teachers' working conditions are students' learning conditions. And so Dr. McNulty talked about the things that this referendum is about, the resources that will come as a result of this referendum passing. And those resources will make our working conditions better, and in return, making the children's learning conditions better. Our children deserve so much more, and they're not receiving it, but it's only because we don't have the resources. We know about what money can do. And so we need those resources here. So it's not that we don't desire to do the things that we know our children deserve, but like Dr. Smith talked about, I was on those buses going down there fighting against the state when they decided to take over the school. And as Mayor Freeman Wilson said, once it was done, it was done. I mean, I sit in a really tough seat. You know, I'm working with the administration, I work with my teachers, I work with the students, so I have to play a lot of you know, different parts to this whole thing. But I know at the end of the day, it's about the kids. I've been here, I could go anywhere and teach because, you know, there's a shortage all over, not the country, but the world. I could go anywhere and teach, but I choose to stay in Gary, and I'm looking for a better day for our students. And, you know, 43 years, I'm not going to teach that much longer. So I'm just, you know, I want to see it better before I decide to hang up my hat and retire. And a lot of people talk about the academics, and so we know that funds help with academics. Academics, you need resources to get better academics. We have the Chromebooks, we have the hotspots. I was excited when MGT called me and said that they were getting the Chromebooks and the hotspots, because when we went out in March for the pandemic, we didn't have those resources. And so our teachers were working hard, putting packages together, going to homes, doing all that kind of thing to make sure that our children had what they needed to have. So I just sit here and I just ask the community to vote yes for this referendum. It's the right thing to do. I'm at the Union office, 1401 Virginia Street. You can call me, you can come by. I don't have anything to hide. I mean, it's about the kids. It's not about MGT. It's not about what happened 20 years ago. I've been here 43 years. I've seen it all. So vote yes for this referendum.
Thank you, President Dunham. And we'll talk offline about that whole retirement talk. No. We have joining us via Zoom 2 more panelists who have specific angles on which to discuss. And we're going to do ladies first with Dr. Vanessa Allen McLeod, President and CEO of the Urban League of Northwest Indiana, who I'm sure will share all of the countless scholarships and academic support that the Urban League provides for the students in Gary, and how the referendum connects with that type of support in the nonprofit community. Dr. Allen McLeod.
Dr. McLeod.
If you can unmute your microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you so much for hosting this event, and to Dr. McNulty and all of the other distinguished guests on the panel. There's not too much more that I can say that has not already been said, except this is an opportunity for all of us to support what the school district is trying to do. I am a graduate of the Gary Community School Corporation. Both of my children graduated through the Gary Community School Corporation. In fact, my oldest daughter is an alumni of Westside, a 1999 alumni of Westside. And she is just really pushing and hoping and praying that our community can come together and support the referendum. If people would support the referendum, this is an opportunity for us to make a difference in the lives of our children. There's not too much more we can do except lend our time and our talent and our treasure and our money. Here's an opportunity to support with our time by mentoring, by supporting the schools, with our talents, providing college and career readiness, which we do. We support offering scholarships, and definitely the only thing that we're asking the community to do is to vote yes. This would, I believe, help the district balance the budget, or should I say erase the deficit. And Dr. McNulty and Dr. Smith can, of course, correct me if I'm wrong, but this referendum may not come back around again for a long time, I'm not sure. But now we have the opportunity, so why not make a difference today? Why not be supportive on today instead of thinking, well, what is my vote going to do? Well, your vote will make a difference, and definitely it will make a difference if you vote yes for the students. So thank you for this opportunity. Stay tuned for the scholarship opportunities that are out there for the listening audience. We have scholarships for returning adult students as well as high school students. But today it's not about Urban League. It's about lending my support to support the referendum and hopefully encouraging the community to do so. And when can they do this? They can do this now with early voting, and they can do it on, definitely on November 3rd. So thank you, Pastor. Thank you, Chelsea, and all others that are there for this opportunity.
And thank you, Dr. Allen McLeod. I would say that there is a direct correlation when you talk about the scholarships and the funding from the referendum, because as we increase academics, it prepares our young people to be competitive for the scholarships that your organization is offering. So thank you so much for your partnership with the district. And last but certainly not least, we have Coach, as we love to call him, Coach Earl Smith Jr., who is a retired educator of the Gary Community School Corporation, who will offer his remarks and comments and commentary on the referendum. Coach Smith? If Sharita can unmute Coach Smith.
Coach, we need you to unmute yourself. We can't hear you on this end.
While we're waiting, let me say I like that last name.
Smith, yes. And for those,
Hello.
Okay,
there he
there we
is.
go.
Hi, Coach, we
All
can
right.
hear you loud and clear.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, first of all, I want to say that I'm very pleased and happy to be a part of this distinguished guest that we have here today in reference to the referendum. You know, being born here in the city of Gary and graduating from Gary Roosevelt many years ago and coming back home to teach, I can remember the outstanding days here in the Gary school system. I spent 56 great years here in the city of Gary in the Gary Community School Corporation. I can remember there was a time when they had a group that had gone across the country to recruit teachers to come to Gary. And the rationale behind that was, it was a great place to be. Coming to Gary, Indiana, because we had an outstanding programs, educational endeavors, all these things were there. And of course, the pay was at the top of the scale. I'm definitely supporting the referendum for a number of reasons. But I think one of the things that sort of been really important to me was sort of earmarked today. I don't know if you saw the Quigley's column today. There was an article in there, and somebody was somewhat witty as to what this thing is all about. And it was indicated that some of the rationale that was given about why we should support it. I'm just going to share a couple of things with you. First of all, they talked about educational opportunities will never measure up to the school district in the area. Equity is the key word they're looking for here. State funding for schools basically is the same. I know sometimes when you listen to WOTH, you get some comments about all this money that's being directed to the schools in Gary. There's a basic understanding that the basic assignment for students here, I think it's about $7,789.74. That's the equivalent of what the basic amount of money that's received through students throughout the state of Indiana. But what raises that is that somewhat complexity clause that they talk about, where there's a little bit more money that's added to that particular assessment, which puts Gary in another category, but not enough. Because if you think that there's enough money to run the state, according to the money that is coming, not run the state, but the money that's come to the state, from the state to the Indiana is enough to run the Gary school system, it's not enough. Another thing that was mentioned about was the different programs, and we, as I mentioned earlier about the equity involved, we want what's best for our kids. You know, we always hear this talk about, hey, this is for the kids, this is for the kids. Now we have an opportunity to get involved, to display that real feeling that we have. If you have a sense of passion for the city of Gary, then you want us to be at the top. And that means we have to come together collectively to make that endeavor a reality. Not something that we just think about, we actually have to get involved. Now, another thing that was of interest in that article, there were 35 referendums that had taken place across in this particular area. 35, that is across the state. And of those referendums, that 26 of those 35 were passed, which is equivalent to about 75%. So the question I ask ourselves is, why is it that we have so many districts that accepted the referendum cause, and yet here in Gary we say, no, we don't need this? We are definitely in need of the referendum because of the fact that what it will do to enhance the school system, to give our kids exposure to things that they need to be involved in. Now, I just got this through the grapevine. I don't know how realistic it is, but we have almost 300 of our kids here in Gary who have migrated to the Hammond School District. And one particular school, because that school is noted primarily for fine arts, we have one of the best fine arts departments in the state of Indiana, right here in Gary. We're not excelling in that particular area anymore. And when we look at the things, the fine arts programs, dancing, our kids like to get involved in dancing. We love music, things to get involved in music. The visual arts instruction is something that's missing. We need drawings and paintings that kids have that ability to put things on display. Photography, graphics, there's so many areas that's involved in the fine arts. We need to get our kids involved in these programs. So those of you out there who are listening, your kid might have a talent that they've not been exposed to. The best way to put them is to put them in a position that they can find out what their talents are, because that's very, very important. Extracurricular activities is what I'm talking about. There are academic teams, there are debate teams, there are mock trials. These are things that you read about that's taking place in other parts of the state. And these are the things that we need to get involved in. Because I'm very passionate about, because athletics has always been important in my life, and I've had the great pleasure of coaching a lot of outstanding athletes. But when I go across the state, one of the questions that's always asked is, what has happened to the athletic programs in the city of Gary? Well, a number of things have happened. First of all, we lost so many kids. We got to come up with some kind of way that we can bring kids back to the Gary School District. Why are they leaving? Well, if you look at the facility, we have to upgrade some of these situations. Let's take West Side. Upgrading the track, the football field, the swimming pool. A couple of times I had going down to the YWCA, and what did we have? We had West Side swimming team, West Side swimming team was actually training for swimming at the Y. I mean, these are the kind of things that we're confronted with, and we have to eliminate those things. That's very, very important. So I could go on talking about a lot of things about it, but I think that collectively we have to come together in the system. We have to understand that the problems that we have, if we address these problems with sincerity and a passion to try to make a difference for our kids, that's really what's really important to me. My whole life has been predicated on trying to make a difference in the lives of the young people that you work with. And every day that I go to work, I never had any problems, because you're working for 56 years, you had to love what you're doing. And that's the thing that we have to build in. We have to get teachers and administrators to get involved. The community needs to get involved. Any way that we can reach out to bring this in as a family. It's not only the kids, they're going to be there, but we as adults have to understand what our roles are. Make that effort to try to make a difference. Don't just talk about it, let's put it in action. So thank you very much for giving me this chance, and I hope I didn't sound too much like a coach.
That's exactly what.
I get kind of wrapped up, but when you start talking about our kids and making a difference in their lives, that's very, very important to me.
Well,
Thank
trust
you very
me.
much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Coach Smith. Trust me, your passion is coming through the screen. It's as if you are right here, and we thank you for your service to the district and your continued commitment to our children in Gary. And now we're going to go into part 2 of our agenda, and I like to call it kind of like the Mythbusters portion, because Pastor Jackson, you came to the district saying, well, let me host a forum so that not only my membership, but the community, hence St. Timothy Community Church, be informed and ask those hard questions. And so I'll turn it over to you to moderate the piece around the different misunderstandings and information and things that you've been hearing from the community that has caused confusion or angst or questions amongst your membership?
All right. So first of all, let me just say this, in this next portion, and we'll go about 20, 25 minutes with this piece, because we do want to also hear the concerns of many of the residents in the city, and a lot of it we've been hearing in the conversation as it refers to this referendum. So one of the things I do want to say in regard to that is that you know, we all, those that are viewing and so forth, live in this city. You know, you have an investment in the city. But then there are those like myself who don't live in the city, but yet I serve in the city through this church and other organizations such as the Urban League and others to make sure that whatever the needs that the city needs, that we do our best, and I do my best as a pastor and one of the leaders in this community to make sure we meet the needs of our people. So there are some concerns. One of our members I ran into actually today, and I thought he was like for the, I was so happy and everything. I was like, oh, are you for the referendum? And he was like, no, I'm against it. And I said, come in my office. And the coming in the office was more having me to understand the position, right? And I think this forum is more, again, giving information out and where people stand and their concerns in regard to it. And so as I met with him today in the conference room, I really wanted to take some time to hear some of the things that he had made mention of. So one is, of course, we've been hearing this whole mismanagement of funds and stuff like that, and the history behind the community school being taken over. And so one of the questions is asked, and I'm sure Dr. McNulty can answer this, is dealing with how or what would you put in place, and I think you have mentioned this before about a committee being put in place to make sure that the funds that are will be allocated through this referendum is accounted for, and there's an accountability for it. So would you just speak a little bit more to that?
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, you've heard a lot about the mistrust. I hear that everywhere I go. And what I can say to that is I can't talk about what happened 20 years ago, nor do I want to continue to talk about what happened 20 years ago. We need to talk about what's happening going forward. And what I can promise you what's going to happen going forward is we have committed to having an oversight committee so that we have asked people to apply for this oversight committee. That will be posted. It is posted on our website, but we will be taking applications. We didn't want to be presumptuous and start the applications until the referendum passes. But once it does pass, God willing, then we will take people's applications and ask them to be a part of this oversight committee so that they can be a part of the process. We want to be transparent with where the money's going, how it's being spent, get input from people in the community so that we can say month to month, this is what's happening with the building projects, this is what's happening with the curricular advancements, what's happening with professional development, so that we can share it with everybody. And we have no problem sharing it, and we want people to be a part of it.
Okay. And just a follow-up question to that is in regards to this what's it called, the oversight
committee.
Oversight committee. So this oversight committee that you're putting together, so the question that comes behind that is having to do with who's going to be responsible for choosing those applicants and how many will be on that committee is another question. And then the other piece you may want to weigh in on is also the role and the authority that committee will have.
So the committee is going to be chosen by the group of stakeholders that's been helping us with the referendum right now. We've got a very strong cross mix of people helping us with the referendum, probably 30, 35 people right now who are on this committee. And so because I think it's a well-rounded group that's a cross mix from the community, they're going to help me pick who should be on this committee, because I don't want it to be political. I don't want it to be favors or anything like that. So we want to make sure that it's a good cross mix of, you know, well-rounded people from the community that can help us sit on that. It's going to meet many times throughout the school year, and it will simply be us presenting the information to them, getting feedback. They will not have voting powers, but they certainly will have the ability to ask questions and to ask where the money's going, what's happening next, those types of things.
Okay. And then what is the qualifications as far as?
You just have to believe in schools and kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Another question has to do more or less your background, right? And so can you just talk a little bit about your background as far as what you bring to the table, being the emergency manager? What was that? Just manager, no emergency. See, that's
Yeah,
another
so-
that's
right?
another thing that's out there, right?
So
No emergency.
So it
Okay.
used to be called the emergency manager, so it's okay. But recently we dropped the emergency part from the title, and it's just manager because we're not in an emergency anymore. We, again, to me, that denotes progress. And so it's just manager. But my qualifications or my background, if you will, is that I started my career as a special education teacher. So I taught as a teacher for many years. I taught middle school and high school, both at the special ed, and I taught regular ed. I was also a volleyball and basketball coach, which I enjoyed very much. From there, I went on into administration, and I was an assistant principal. I was a high school principal for many years. I was also the assistant superintendent of the State Department in Illinois, and I was the superintendent in East Chicago for many years before I took this position.
All right, maybe there's some questions on the social media.
I think they are just so overwhelmed with all this information that we can keep moving with your list of questions.
I have something that I would like to answer
Oh,
that
absolutely,
I
Dr. McNulty.
Sure. I was going to ask if Mr. Godwin could help me answer the question that I've been asked several times today about the Facebook post about the monies that were allocated for Theo Bowman, because I've been asked if that's dedicated to the Gary Community School Corporation, and I've been saying that it is not, but I know there's been some confusion around that.
Yes, I too saw that post and I saw all the reactions and, oh God, the problem is solved, but I think it is important to be very clear in what happened. So the Gary Bond Bank is a new entity that started this year. Their first transaction involved Theo Bowman, and they're basically doing a refinancing of debt. And so as part of that, I sponsored, and I think unanimous members of the council passed a required resolution to allow it to go through the Gary Bond Bank, which basically makes the bond tax exempt, which makes it more attractive to investors. So basically, Theo Bowman is refinancing its debt, and of course, the mayor signed off on that through the Gary Bond Bank. That does not at all impact the Gary Community School Corporation, your local neighborhood public school. That's one particular school who was able to take advantage of a debt refinancing.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
And it's very important to know, because a lot of people thought problem is solved, no tax hikes are
Exactly.
required. And I just want to say, I totally get it, right? I pay property taxes, pay a lot of them, and I understand that people get frustrated with that. And I think the tax calculator is very important, and that there's the website that people can go to. I know you're available to walk people through it so they can actually see, is it going to be $50 or $200 or $500 or whatever the number is for me. I know I have several folks in my district who live on the lakefront for whom it may be $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 for a $600,000 or $700,000 or $800,000 house in terms of assessed valuation. We know that the majority of my district and the majority of the city is far, far less in terms of assessed valuation. So I understand the passions and the concerns, because it's real, but I hope that through all the noise, as I think we've tried to say, the focus is on providing a first-class educational environment for the students, but also, and I think we don't want to miss our teachers in this process. Teachers are true public servants. I mean, for so many kids, it is the only responsible adult that they have an interaction with for a consistent amount of time over the course of a year or years. And so it's important that we show respect to our teachers, that we value what you do. We value the service that you provide, and to not have had a raise for 12 years is unconscionable. And we recognize that we cannot compete with neighboring school districts if we keep going down this road. And so I think we all know that teacher, whether you went to the Gary Community Schools or not. Everybody had that teacher or those teachers who were transformative in your life. And those of us who are not willing to be teachers and to take that financial sacrifice, we have to give back, And so to me, it's about the students, but it's also about the teachers, which of course is ultimately about the students. because those teachers in that classroom are the power force for educating our children.
And I appreciate you mentioning the tax calculator, and I want to also make sure that I mentioned that there's 2 tax calculators on our website. One is for the average citizen. As we did the research before we proposed this referendum, we looked at the average home assessed value. The average home assessed value in Gary is $60,000, which is where we've come up with that number of the $58 a year. But certainly we are encouraging everyone to go on our website and plug in your home assessed value with no decimals and no commas, just straight numbers, and it'll tell you exactly what your increase would be. We also have a second tax calculator on there, and that's for seniors, because many of the seniors get tax exemptions, and their increase is going to be 0 or very minimal. I tell the story that I had the opportunity, I've been visiting many churches, I had the opportunity to worship at a church several weeks ago, and one of the women came up to me and gave me her home assessed value, and I helped plug it into my phone because I take it around and help people with that, and her home assessed value was $70,000, and her tax increment was going to be $3. So I think it's really important for seniors to understand that this is going to be very minimal for them, because I know there's a lot of people trying to scare our seniors to tell them that this is going to be a huge impact when that's simply not the case.
Chelsea, I would like to deal with the issue that Pastor Jackson brought up, and it was directed towards Dr. McNulty. But there's some additional information that I think needs to be shared with the community when we start talking about transparency and accountability. We need to understand that that I became, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I became a voice for the community who felt that MGT in the past did not allow people to ask questions and to answer questions. That situation has been resolved now. DUAP has taken a position, that's the Distress Unit Board, has made a decision that is now part of MGT's contract, that they must allow citizens to ask questions, and they must provide the answers to those questions. In addition to that, when we start talking about accountability, MGT has more accountability to the state than the normal traditional school corporation. For accountability with the state for the traditional school corporation, they come in, they do audits. That's done periodic. MGT has to report every month to DUAB. They have to work consistently with Courtney, and so there's more accountability, more transparency that's being required of them, that's being required of the traditional public school as far as transparency and accountability. Can we undo the past? No. MGT had a terrible record perception of not sharing information. That's the past. We can't undo the past. All we can do is make corrections for the future. We have put those corrections in place. Mrs. Dunham can tell you today, even DUAB decided that before they were not allowing citizens to remonstrate, to share their thoughts with that board. I convinced them to say, look, we no longer have a local school board. You are our school board. You must allow these citizens to speak. Geneva can tell you 3 people took advantage of that today, and they were given the opportunity to speak. And so we're correcting some of the past. Things are getting better. Give us a chance to help the children. That's what we're trying to do. Give us a chance, and whatever problems there are, share them with us, and we'll do our best. I hope that as they look at the quality of this panel here today, these people are not here with no shams. They're not trying to run a game on people. They're committed to service, all of us. And so will we lead you down a primrose path? No. We're here because we're committed to Gary. We love Gary. We love the children. We're concerned about the futures. We are not the Clarence Thomases of the world. Clarence Thomas was given all the opportunities that he wanted to shut the door, pull up the rug. He wanted to tear down the bridge that he went across. We want the children to have what we had here in Gary, Indiana, what we experienced. And this is a way to do it, and it's a way to return our school corporation back to local control. As the mayor said, our former mayor said, that's probably not going to happen if we don't do this.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, and I can go on record to say, in every meeting, on every call, Dr. Smith holds our feet to the fire. If there's a question that one of his constituents has brought forth, we better go get the answer to it, because he's going to report back and he's going to let us know if we're not doing it fast enough. So we thank you for being that advocate, the representative on the DUAB board, because again, that is the reporting body where, for now, until we get out of local control, back to local control, that all the transparency, all the reporting has to go to. And so, back to you, Dr. Jackson.
Okay. Well, before we close this, there may be any other final remarks anyone want to give, and then Chelsea will give your final remarks, and then I'll close it out. Okay. Anything else anybody want to say?
I would just take the opportunity to say that we have to ask ourselves, what are we willing to invest in our children? And right now, I don't have a kid in the Gary Community School Corporation. Haven't had one for a while, but we buy $200 gym shoes. We
Yes.
buy game
What do
systems
you
as
buy?
grandparents. We buy weave for hairdos. We buy all kinds of things. But, you know, when I think about the fact that we have 19 programs at our career center for young people who want to start their careers sooner than later, things like culinary and EMTs and other opportunities that will make them upstanding citizens. When I think about the fact that we are working with those young people who have academic challenges, and they have a plan to do that. You know, I want to close with a story. I had the opportunity to go over to West Side to take a young man who hadn't yet logged on this year. So we know school started in August. I took him last week, so October. And to a person, the people that we encountered exhibited concern about why he hadn't been there, and a commitment to say to him, we're going to help you catch up because your education is so important. And so when you talk about teachers and administrators and those who work in the school, that's not my ministry, right? But that being the only responsible adult that our kids see sometimes, I mean, because this kid has a parent. But, you know, so when we talk about being overly focused on the past and who's in charge and how it happened, and, you know, as my grandfather used to say, who shot John? That's really losing sight of the most important thing about our school corporation, and that is our children.
Chelsea, I just wanted to say, right now, it's negotiation seasons for teachers. We start September 15th, and we have to be done by November 15th. So we had our first session in Gary, and so Dr. McNulty was on one side of the table, and I was on the other side of the table. So
Kind of like you are right now.
Right. If you know anything about unions and administration, that's just how we roll. But, and I said to her that I'm really tired of us being a statistic, because as a teacher in Gary, that's what we are. As being the state federation president, I go all over the state. And when I talk about we haven't had a raise in 12 years, people look at me like I'm crazy. And they say, how do you exist? How do you teach? Well, I'm one of those people. I am a teacher on leave as a union president. If I run to be the president for the next term and I don't win, I go back into the classroom. So I'm one of those teachers, and the state we used to have increments where every year we got a raise. Every year you knew you were gonna get a raise, but the state of Indiana took that away and they tied our raises up to test scores, which we all know as humans what tests can do and how some days you're on and some days you're not. And so we just don't think that that's a good rubric or scale why you should get praised. But anyway, so I'm like, I don't want to be a statistic anymore. I don't want to be saying, oh, people look at me like 12 years, like they don't believe it. How do you manage? I have a young father on my negotiating team, and he was passionate about being a dad and being the breadwinner for his family. How am I to do that? And most of my young teachers have 2 jobs. I mean, driving for Jimmy John's and working as a clerk at Mike Anderson Chevrolet. And so when it's time to have meetings after school and doing after school activities, I actually had a teacher who gives blood so they can be a sponsor of a club, because if they have to stay after school. And so they want to do that, but so they need that, they get that second income so they can do that after school activity, so they do that to sustain their income. So there's a lot of horror stories about teachers not having a raise for 12 years. So I hope that, I pray and I'm fighting and everybody I see, I talk about the referendum, that it needs to pass for the children. Yes, for the children. Number one, for the children. But just be real. As an employee, as a grown-up, as a bill payer, as a sustainer of the households, teachers should get a raise. And so some people don't think that we should, but, we're not glorified babysitters. We actually work. And I would just say, come to any class. I mean, come look at any Google Classroom. And we met parents today on the poll that said, hey, I didn't know, but now I do. With the virtual learning, I know what teachers go through. So, I'm just a testimony as to, when people talk about the money is there. I've been negotiating for 4 years. The money is not there. We go through that budget with a fine-tooth comb. If it was there, I tell you, I could get it. It's not there.
Chelsea,
Thank you, Glenn.
I would like to add a little bit more. I don't have any offsprings. I don't have any great-grands and great-great-grands and none of that. So why am I supporting this? I'm supporting it for the good of society, for the good of Gary. You know what? You don't have to be a direct beneficiary of something to do this, and I'm going to be impacted by this because I have a home, and I'm going to have to pay for that home. I have 3 rental properties. They're slab houses. I don't think I'm super rich or anything. They're just little 4-room slab houses, okay? And their value assessed less than $60,000. So I'm not going to be paying a lot for them, but I am going to be paying for them, okay? I'm willing to do it for the good of Gary because I believe in Gary and I want Gary to prosper. We have to stop and think that you don't have to be the direct beneficiary of things in order for you to support them, because we do it all the time. I thank God that I've never had a fire, but I pay for part of my taxes go for fire protection, okay? I thank God that I occasionally have had to use the police department, but I haven't had to use them on a regular basis, so I'm paying for more than what I'm getting out of it. But I pay it anyway. I don't use public libraries. They're almost a thing of the past for us because we find everything we want to on the internet, but we still need them in this community, so I pay for libraries that I don't use. We pay for things all the time that we don't use. And so for those people who want to be selfish and to think about what is it in for me, then I'm saying to you that you've got to think of a bigger picture. You've got to have a panoramic view of this and not a tunnel view of this issue. It is imperative that we do this. There are 2 things that I value in life. Now, I like my bling bling. I don't feel right if I don't have my jewelry on when I leave out the house. I'll go back home and get it. I'm not dressed. I love my clothes. I am not married. I don't have any kids to take care of and stuff. So my thing is buying clothes, okay? I love clothes,
I think
okay?
I can relate.
So I'll be expecting a donation from you to the church,
Reverend,
okay?
You're going to share the chicken after this summer. I'm going to share some clothes with you after. Okay. And so I value all those things, but the two things that I really value is education and salvation, because people they can take my clothes away from me. They can take my jewelry away from me.
Yeah.
If I thought I had good looks, they can take that away from me because they can slice my face up and make me look like a monster. I value education and salvation. That's why at the end of the book of Matthew, when Jesus didn't make us all pastors, but he made us preachers, that's why I preach Jesus, okay? I have been a beneficiary of a good education from the Gary Community School Corporation. Am I the sharpest tack in the toolbox? No. Am I the smartest cookie in the cookie jar? No, I'm not. But Gary prepared me, and I'm a debtor. And everybody who lives in Gary, who came up, their roots came up in Gary, we are debtors. We owe, and we have to keep that in mind. And so what I'm saying to you is, I whine out, forgive me, I got motor mouth, dripping tongue, and running lips. Okay, but the problem is that we got to get to the root of the problem. We got to get to the root. We're looking at all the symptoms and using them as excuses. The root of the problem is that the state of Indiana does not properly fund public education. That's the root of the problem. We got these billions of dollars that we're sitting on there and say, oh, look at Indiana. We're the richest state. We're the best managers of the people's money, and we're sitting on all this money and not taking care of education. Look at the root of the problem. If it was not a problem, why would so many school corporations, better off than we are, floating referendums? That's what they have set up, to shift the burden from the state to the local communities. And we allow people to do to us what we give them permission to. We allow the legislators to do that. I voted against that crap. And I would say something else, Pastor, and I don't curse. But I would say something else if I wasn't here. But the bottom line is we need to look at the root of the problem. We wouldn't have to have referendums if we made the state do what is just, and using that word that Coach Smith, what is equitable, what we should be doing, not equal, because where there's more need, that's what equity means. That if you have more need, you supply the need. And so I'm begging, I'm pleading, I'm beseeching, I'm asking, I'm doing whatever you want to do. I'll be your slave. I'll be your slave if you don't misuse me for a day. If you vote for this referendum, okay? I urge you to do it. Thank you.
He's going. All right, well, I'm looking for your check. Okay. Dr. Vanessa McLeod wants to give some final remarks, and then Chelsea we'll wrap it up with Chelsea, and then I'll close. Okay.
Thank you, Pastor. I just wanted to acknowledge what Dr. McNulty said, and I wanted to make sure that we all heard that clearly, that there has been an increase in the student enrollment in the Gary Community School Corporation, and that enrollment has not happened. This is the first time in 12 years, so that's something positive that we should really acknowledge. I also want to dispel some of the myths I heard, and maybe Dr. McNulty or Dr. Smith can chime in on this. When the referendum passes, that money will not go to the manager or the NGT administration. It goes directly to support those activities for students and for teachers. I think there's a myth out there that if the referendum passes, that is going into NGT. The other thing I want to do is just say thank you to the principals, thank you to the counselors, and especially the teachers. If it was not for the teachers and all of the others in the school district, I would not be in this position, and my children would not be where they are. In fact, Representative Smith was the principal over at Williams when my daughters were there. Now they are grown and gone, and they are independent, productive citizens, and they're not in my pocket. So I thank you, teachers, for the learning that you taught them. And then let's not forget about the parents who continue to send their children to the Gary Community School Corporation or continue to try to work with you. There was a time when many of us were struggling and still struggling, and all we needed was a smile, a helping hand, and I'm hoping and just thanking the parents for continuing to trust you with their children. And I heard about the oversight committee. I'm glad about that. But last but not least, I'm just asking everyone to go out and take a chance and just vote yes for the referendum. Yes, there have been some mistakes in the past, and we all have made mistakes. But I thank God that He continued to forgive me over, and like the second time, the 22nd time, the 200th time, and over and over, He continues to give us another chance. So I'm asking that we just go out and encourage the parents and everyone else to give the district another chance, and the way they can do that is by voting yes for the referendum. Thank you, Pastor. Thank you, Dr. McNulty, and all of you distinguished guests on the panel. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dr. McLeod. Coach wants to say a few quick remarks, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Coach.
I'll keep it short, but this referendum, if it fails, I mean, we need to take a look at, it will be continued state takeover. In other words, there will be very little, if no representation. Parents will have a tendency to send their kids elsewhere. We will be losing residents to school districts where there's a strong emphasis on improving the schools. And think about the businesses who might be somewhat reluctant to come to Gary to establish a business with jobs that are more higher paying jobs or jobs above the minimum wage jobs. But businesses will have be somewhat reluctant maybe to come into Gary where there's no primary emphasis on the school system. So we have to keep those things in mind. And in conclusion, I'm really impressed how the money is going to be spent, because it mentioned something about 30% would be diverted toward teachers. In other words, the first $100 million, I think that's been mentioned. Then there'll be some improvement in the arts, the fine arts, and athletics would garner something like 21%. And of course, strengthening the safety of students and the support services, 49%. That's a positive way to distribute the money and the finance that will be coming in. So I'm encouraging all the parents to get involved in this. This is a chance, again, as I mentioned, to become actively involved in making this city, enhancing the growth of our city, the continued growth. And it's going to take togetherness of everybody, not just one, but the entire group. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Coach. Margaret Himes, Shirley Moorhead, May Tyler, Mrs. Lyles, Mrs. Avery, Miss Hairston, Miss Bradley, Miss Sefchak. Who are these people? They're my teachers. Elementary, middle school, high school, and the list goes on and on. And these are the individuals who undoubtedly help mold Chelsea Stalling Whittington into who she is today. I have a running joke with Dr. Vernon Smith about who loves Gary more, and the only reason he wins is because he's been on the earth long enough to love Gary more than I do. And so, you know, people often, again, we've talked all evening about the dollars, who's getting paid what and by whom, and it's so frustrating here, and many others who have joined us know where our hearts truly lie. And so I'm going to keep my remarks short. Pastor Jackson, thank you for allowing us this platform. I know that my profession is PR, but I don't have that hat on tonight. Tonight, I'm strictly a West Side Cougar, an Ernie Powell Red Devil, a Tolliston Raider, a little girl from Gary who was crowned by Dr. Smith as Miss Gary of the Future back in 1976. He probably doesn't remember that when the IU Dons had that competition where I said my speech and was crowned. And I still am proud to hold that title because Gary, now it's time for me to stomp for the future of Gary. That's our children. And so whatever I can do, whatever I can say tonight, that person who's watching or listening, who's on the fence, put everything aside and think about that teacher, that Miss Lyles, that Miss Avery, who helped make you who you are today. And now you have an opportunity to shovel the load with us together, which will make it lighter, to make a difference for our future, our children. A vote against the referendum is a vote against our future. A vote yes means yes for Gary's children. Thank you, Dr. Jackson.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me just, as we conclude tonight, I want to thank all the speakers for coming and being a part of this forum. Being a community church and I as a community pastor, I really believe it's important to get the information out to not only just my congregation, my congregants, but also to the citizens of Gary. So let me just say this. I said this on Monday in the radio time we shared together in support and talking about and getting the information out regarding the referendum. But Whitney Houston has that song that's been played, and everyone else all. You want to sing it? We're going to close right now. But this great love of all, right? And so she talks about that the children. I believe the children are our future, right? And to teach them well and let them lead the way. And so what I indicated on Monday was that that we can't, kids can't lead if we don't teach. And so we have to make it our prerogative to make sure that the resources are there to be able to educate our kids so that they can be leaders in our community and leaders in our state and leaders in our local and also our federal governments and just leaders in general. And so we want to make sure that the beauty, let them know that there's beauty within them. And so all that we do, all that we sacrifice as a people, we sacrifice to make sure that our kids have an opportunity to be able to do what they desire and what they dream to do. And I always think about, and I share this very quickly, growing up as a kid, I grew up in a wonderful environment, family-wise, and then the educational opportunities was there, right? But I personally had a learning disability. And so in my learning disability, the teacher in the classroom, and this was a black teacher in the classroom, that said I would never amount to anything and I'll never be anything because of my learning disability. But there were other teachers, there were church members, and there were community people that pulled together to support this young black African-American male and to make sure that I had the resources to correct my speech. You would never thought I was a stutterer, right? You never would have thought that I had a hearing impairment. And so I thank God for those folks that dedicated their lives and their resources to make sure that I was taken care of. So I said all that to say this, is that now I stand and sit before you, right, as a pastor of a church, and I stand before you and sit before you as having a doctoral degree, right? And so a person that said I couldn't do it, and I proved it wrong. And so think of how many kids are in that predicament, right? And so they're in an environment where it's opposing them, against them, and it seems like they're fighting against the odds. But when we have a people that can come together to say, you know what, the educational system did well for me, and I wanted to do well for you. And so I want to close with that, to put that on each other's hearts and minds as we begin to conclude this. And then I encourage you to vote on November 3rd. That's our right, and we want to make sure that everybody does just that. Many people have sacrificed their lives for the opportunity for us to vote, And we want to make sure that message is also given as we close tonight, okay? All right, so I would say let us close by just going in peace, and I give the peace and love and the grace of our Almighty God to you, and go and be a witness, and go and be a success, and go and give the good news. And it's not only just the good news of the gospel, but it's the good news that we all can come together as a people to make our lives better and make our city better. Have a great night, and again, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, everybody.
Now I got to get home for the.
Oh, I'll get you some wings. It's in the bag. It's in the bag. Chicken wings. Sharks. You can